What's up, everybody? My name is Mrs. Pingle and you're watching Art at Home. In today's video, we're gonna be talking about sketching from an image and why that's an important sketchbook practice. Let's dive into it. Here I have some examples from students in my 2D design class at Grand River Prep. This was during the spring of 2020, so school was completely online, and that's kind of where I got this idea to start a YouTube channel, just thinking about art at home and what students need to do in order to pull that off. One of the reasons that I really like this type of sketchbook exercise is because students are not required to come up with something original. And when they're not required to come up with original content, that allows them to focus more on just the recreation aspect, their line work, their shading, practicing proportions, and just in general using their observational skills. And if you know me, you know that I love art history and I love working it into my studio classes as well. So this is just one way to practice sketching and all the techniques that go with that, but also to learn some art history too. Alright, so the materials you're going to need, I would recommend using a set of graphite pencils, but if you don't have any, then a number 2 pencil is fine. Just make sure it's a wooden one and not a mechanical one, since we're going to be doing a lot of shading for this sketch. I would also recommend getting some erasers around, and a pencil sharpener, and a reference photo of whatever you want to draw, and it can be a paper photo or a digital photo. You should also have a sketchbook or a piece of blank paper and a ruler for making straight edges if you want one, but that's optional. I'm ready to begin now that I have all of my materials. Here's my super old phone with my reference photo. And I'm actually not going to use this ruler. You can use one to make, perfectly straight thumbnail boxes, but I've just decided that I'm going to not only freehand it, but I'm going to use my number 2 pencil the entire time just to show you that it's possible to do that and get a really good value drawing with good range. But if I were going to use my graphite pencils, I would use a range like this, HB, 2B, and 5B, just to get a lot of good darks in there without having to press too hard. As far as reference photos go, the bigger the picture, the easier this will be for you, but I just wanted to use my phone since that would fit nicely on the camera screen. And here I am just freehanding a quick thumbnail box. Make sure that your orientation for the thumbnail box matches your reference photo. So if you have a reference photo that is longer than it is tall, make sure that your thumbnail box is longer than it is tall. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is take a look at how tall this object is. You see how this cypress tree almost touches the top, but not quite? I'm gonna make a little notch right there, and I'm looking at the side of it too. It almost touches the side of the picture frame, but not quite. So I'm making little notches that just kind of show where these corners of any given object hit. That way I can try to keep the proportions correct. I talked about proportions in my Sketching 101 video, but just a quick recap. Proportions are a part compared to a whole. So it's a way of making sure that all the objects stay realistic looking by not changing the relationship of the size of each object compared to the other objects. So this shrub right here, for instance, it's obviously the shortest thing that I've drawn so far. So these notches that you see annotating where the tops of each object are kind of like steps, and you can see that replicated in the reference photo. So as I'm going through and just kind of putting like little ghostly outlines and just notches of where things go, I'm trying to make sure that I'm keeping everything proportionate to each other, but also to the picture frame as a whole. About now is when I realized that I did not leave enough space for the wheat field. You see how this should be a little taller right here? That's why I say proportions are important, and you should always be checking it so you don't have to erase the whole thing. But now I'm just gonna erase the thumbnail box bottom and bring it down a little bit. That way I have some more space. And honestly, if you look at that thumbnail, that looks a lot closer to my reference photo anyway, so it works out. So So I've gotten these mountains that are in the background penciled in, at least their outlines, and now I'm gonna start the outline for the cypress trees. And these have a really good texture on them. It might be kind of hard to tell from my phone screen, but I'm gonna try to emphasize that in my sketch without getting slowed down by it. So you don't wanna spend forever and ever trying to get the texture perfect because it never will be perfect. Just learn to go fast and get used to looking more at the reference photo than you do at your paper. So kind of pretend like it is a blind contour drawing where you are tracing the outlines of the objects with your eyes and translating that down to your hands. That's going to get you better textures and more realistic outlines than if you were just drawing what you think you see as opposed to what is there. And I'm realizing right here that the wheat field should be just a little bit taller, so I'm gonna grab my eraser pen, which is good for erasing really small details and tight lines, and just widen that up a bit before I move on. So as I finish up the outlines for my midground, my hope is that your eyes are kind of bouncing back and forth between my reference photo and where I am in the drawing. That way you can kind of see these outlines and tell where I am in the drawing, and you're practicing tracing the content with your eyes as you're doing this. The last thing I need to do some outlining in is the sky, and take a look at these clouds. Van Gogh was really well known for doing kind of big, fluffy, swirling forms, and this is a good example of that. So instead of sitting here and trying to get this exactly perfect, I'm just going to knock this out almost in one continuous line, and doing so with just a very loose grip on my pencil, turning the pencil very sideways so that I make very light lines that can be easily fixed if I need to, and just trying my best to trace each line that I see in the sky with my eyes and translating that down into my paper. So again, kind of like a blind contour exercise. One thing that I have learned to do is to set my pencil down for just a moment and stand back and take a look at it kind of with fresh eyes. If you look at it from a different angle, things might jump out at you as being incorrect that didn't before. So try your best to just take a break in between and just take a look at it closely before you move on to the shading part. So even though this is a sketch, don't be afraid to do textures. So for instance, the hatch marks that you see me making here almost read like stipples, because when Van Gogh was wanting to show individual leaves on a plant, he often just did one single brush stroke with one tiny little brush, and that's what I'm trying to replicate here with my stippling technique. Don't forget that as you watch me do this, be sure to bounce your eyes back and forth between where I am in the reference photo and where I am in the sketch, so that you can kind of understand my thought process as to why I decided to draw something a certain way. When you're drawing textures like these little flowers that I'm about to draw right here, Be sure that you don't feel obligated to replicate it exactly how you see it. So this is another instance of going quickly and just trying your best to trace outlines with your eyes to translate them to your hand. That way you're not bogged down by detail, but really you're just replicating it as quickly as you can and thinking about it like you're trying to mimic the texture rather than capturing it completely. As you start shading more and more, be sure that you have your pencil kind of turned more sideways than you would if you were doing just a normal tripod grip. So a tripod grip is good for when you're writing or when you're drawing very specific lines, but if you're starting to shade, it will go a lot faster and look a lot nicer if that pencil is turned way more sideways than normal so that you're using the broad side of the pencil lead rather than the tip. Another thing to remember is that the pressure you put on the pencil matters. So if you want something to read as a darker value, be sure to press a little harder. And if you want it to be lighter, then obviously press lighter. Here I'm starting to do the shadows for these cypress trees, but then realized it would be a lot smarter and faster for me to just put a really big field of kind of a mid-range down first, and then to put the shadows on top of that so that you have these bright spots kind of peeking through. So sometimes it really is easier to work light to dark. Because I have used this same pencil the entire time, you'll notice here that my lead has become kind of dull. A lot of people would say that's not dull yet, but for me, I need it to be a little sharper to get those branches across. So I'm gonna go ahead and sharpen it real quick so that I can get a better texture on the outside of these cypress trees, like so. Something I'm noticing is right here there is actually two plants, which I didn't catch the first time. So there's this darker kind of grassier plant, and then there's this lighter green shrub that is in front of it. So I'm just trying to add more contrast into the different things that I see, putting more darks where I see dark things and leaving light highlighted areas alone so that they stand out more. And that is one of the drawbacks of using just one pencil the entire time. Even if you're varying your pressure, you're still not going to get quite as much contrast as you would if you were using a graphite pencil set. So I do recommend using those, but if you only have a number 2 pencil and that's all you got, then just, make it work the best that you can. I like to use the Derwent pencils that I got in 2009 when I started college. So they have lasted me over 10 years and they weren't that expensive. So if you're going to be doing a lot of sketching, I really recommend getting a nice set. Derwent is a good one. Just a reminder, as you're shading complicated things like this sky that has a lot of different values going on, to just turn your pencil sideways, go quick, but be loose about it. Don't go slow and pretend that like you're gonna be able to get it perfectly, because no matter what, it's not gonna be perfect. So just, let your eyes tell you where you see those different highlights and shadows, and you'll be fine. So now I'm just going through and adding any little finishing touches. For instance, I saw more shadow on the left-hand side of that shrub, so I added more, and just darkening up some areas, making sure that I haven't forgotten anything that would make this look even better. So now I'm going through and adding the identifiers for this painting, and the identifiers for any work of art are going to be the title, artist, date, medium, location that it was made, and the movement that it was made during. This is where we get to work in some of that good art history knowledge. Even though this is more of a studio-based assignment, it still helps you learn what Vincent van Gogh's paintings look like and teaches you to look really closely at different artworks. If you are one of my students, then please be sure to take a photo of your sketch and to submit it so that I can grade it. But if you're just out there and you like doing art tutorials for fun, I would still love to see a photo of your work. So feel free to post a photo on Instagram or Twitter and tag me in it, so that way I can take a look and tell you what I think. That's all for today's video, everybody. Big thanks to the Grand River Prep students who allowed me to use their sketchbook examples for this video. Thank you so much, really appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe down below so that I know to make more videos like this, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye! Yep.